Today's guest is Peter Tateishi. He's the CEO at AGC of California. Peter, thank you for coming on the show.
Appreciate the invitation. I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. Your background, in and around construction and other things around government relations and business. Um, I think your early education was, a bit around sort of public administration and government. So, what was your thought there, original thought?
Well, I always had a passion for, I'll say, politics and policy, and so early on in my life, even when I was much younger, I had a passion to kind of get into that space, and so I went to college to get my undergrad in kind of political science, and then my master's in public administration because I really wanted to actually work within the government sector, and very quickly. Things kind of evolved, and I went from I always liked local government because that's where you had the most impact on day to day lives, and I had a plan to work for the county of Sacramento, if you will, and our local congressman got elected and said, "I have a different idea for you," and so ended up spending almost 8 years with him in different roles, but most of my time as chief of staff back in Washington D.C. for our member of Congress, and really great opportunity, great experience to be able to actually work on policy and decisions that were impacting the whole country. So not just my community, but really the whole country, and in some ways the world, because policy in America is policy globally. So very interesting to be able to do that, and it taught me a lot, and I gained a lot of appreciation for what we do as a country, who we are as a country, and really was a great part of my life. So was really happy to serve the people of California as well as the people of the country.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with government. Describe the chief of staff role as you knew it.
Yeah, so as chief of staff, I was the primary staff person for the member of Congress. We had 16 staff, some in our district office, some in our Washington, D.C. office, and I oversaw all of those individuals in support of our congressman. So I would also fill in for him, not in voting, but on a lot of conversations in meetings in both the district and in Washington, D.C. So really tried to lead his policy initiatives and his efforts on behalf of the District 3 in California. And was really fun to be able to kind of work with other staff members, members of Congress, as well as just individuals from all over the country. Because what is great about Washington, D.C. is that you will have people from all over this great country come to the Capitol to work together on policies and trying to make America better in that sense. So it was really fun being that chief role, lots of responsibilities. I'll say when my boss was happy, it was great. When he was a little frustrated, it came right on me. And luckily, he wasn't frustrated too often. But we really did have to advise him, help him understand what's going on, to take a lot of meetings because there's only one of him. And so we needed to be able to support all of the different asks and interest groups and constituents that were calling in, scheduling for meetings, and really hearing all the different voices and opinions. So really, really cool opportunity to be able to help set the stage for my member of Congress and his priorities and work on behalf of him with the Speaker's office, with the leadership in the Congress, as well as then our district and our local government elected officials, as well as state officials and our everyday constituents within the district.
Yeah, I've always wondered what the communication or the feedback loop, or like you said, the meetings are like from your end, right? Because obviously, there's a few of you, and there's a lot of the people in the district. How did you sort of manage that flow communication?
A lot of it is, we had some great staff who were able to meet day to day. So we had field representatives, constituent service representatives, and district directors who were out and about meeting with folks. I was fortunate enough to be able to meet with them as well at times. What I can tell you is that there's a lot of conversations. And so I'll say those who were, I'll say, more organized and prepared with their talking points and understood the full issue really did spark our interest because we were looking for feedback. We were looking for concerns and opportunities to help make legislation better, or in some cases, introduce new legislation, what have you. And so being able to hear from them was great. But I'll say just having an idea isn't always practical, right? Because every idea can be good, but then putting it into law, putting it into practice can be very, very difficult. And so,
Yeah.
those who had done some of their homework around that and really can I'll say, word well and be concise with their asks and their concerns or their challenges or why they were supporting something, really did go a little bit farther than those who just, I'll say, had a general feel but didn't know why or couldn't express why they were feeling that.
God, you talk about preparation. I feel like there's a story somewhere of, these some of these individuals that come very prepared. Do you have sort of an example? Just so that someone that's listening
Yeah.
is saying, "Hey, I see something that's not working." What does preparation look like from
Well,
your
showing us exactly how the law is impacting you. So we had a great example right after the Affordable Care Act was passed, as a term in Obamacare went into play, we had local businesses in our district who had some concerns over what the Affordable Care Act meant to them, and it was less on the healthcare side, to be honest. It wasn't actually the pieces that we all thought we were talking about. It was kind of the enforcement mechanism to ensure that everyone was providing healthcare. So you had actually a lot of sellers on eBay and Amazon who came in and said, "Okay, here's what the law now says on what I have to do from a 1099 perspective." And a 1099 is a tax document that when you do vending components back and forth or sales, you have to 1099. Well, the Obamacare component actually had a threshold that lowered down to any time there's a transaction of $500 aggregate, so it could be cumulative, you had to 1099. And so we had small folks who were selling things on eBay or Amazon who were realizing we now have an administrative nightmare on our hands for everything we had to do. Again, nothing related to the actual delivery of healthcare, but a new burden to try to ensure that people were doing that you could track were they businesses and were they doing what they were doing. And the threshold was so low that a lot of people were getting caught up in this administrative burden. So my boss was able to hear from those constituents, see the exact problem, and be able to say, okay, this doesn't make sense. And we actually introduced legislation that got passed and signed by President Obama to even repeal that portion of the Affordable Care Act because it didn't make sense, right? It was a practical problem with a practical solution. And so, and when I say practical problem, it was a problem that could be understood. It was not tied to the idea that the Affordable Care Act was bad in and of itself. It was, here's something that was a little bit, overzealous in what it was trying to do and had an unintended consequence, and we could see it, we could recognize it, and we could surgically fix that. And that's what was allowable. A lot of times, and I'll say what some of the dysfunctions you see right now in Congress is, we're trying to repeal the whole, or we're trying to, implement the whole. And at the end of the day, policy is really a series of compromises. And unless we're willing to kind of compromise and surgically approach things, it's really hard to get big things done. It's very rare that we find a cure-all pill. So we tend to find, though, in Congress that we take the biggest bite of the apple instead of saying, let's take this one bite at a time. And so this was a great example of where, my boss was on the other side of the aisle as the president. This was the president's biggest initiative. And yet we were able to work bipartisanly and get a change done to the Affordable Care Act, right? Because it wasn't overreaching on the repeal. It wasn't trying to do anything other than let's provide relief because this was an unintended consequence to the policy.
I see, yeah. So your role in government, and how did it sort of transition or lead to your involvement in associations and chambers and stuff like that?
So, associations, chambers of commerce, I've run both chambers of commerces and different associations now. Happy to be here at AGC of California. They're really focused in a big way around the advocacy for those industries. And so associations, tend to be very focused on a singular industry, and so like in the case now with the construction industry, especially commercial construction side of things, chambers are a little bit broader. It's for all business, which means that you're not always able to just focus on one sector or one marketplace. But at the end of the day, there's a lot in there where government has impact on the day-to-day opportunities or challenges of businesses, and so having worked with government in such a big way, it became a natural fit for me to go to the policy side of the chamber or the association world and be able to be that voice, that advocate, and help them as companies, as members, be able to kind of maneuver government it from my experience and be able to get things done in a different way. So it was a natural migration, to be honest, for me to be able to kind of come into the association world. And in a lot of ways, it's very similar to a member of Congress's office. We have constituents, right? We have members who choose to belong to the association or to the chamber, and they're your constituents at that point, and you are hearing their needs and their concerns, and then you work with decision makers at all levels, whether it's local, state, federal, to try to make it better and easier for them to be able to accomplish their goals and hit their desired outcomes.
Yeah, great. Now, with the AGC of California, what do you do there? What are the initiatives that you're moving forward?
So at AGC of California, we are the Commercial Construction Association for the state of California. So when we think about that, we represent members or contractors who build everything except for single family housing. We'll do the site development, but we don't actually build the single family housing. We'll do the multifamily. We'll do schools, hospitals, highways, bridges, dams, you name it. We will build all of those, and so we represent those contractors, both general and specialty contractors, small, diverse, or disenfranchised businesses as well, or disadvantaged businesses. So we're a part of all of the spectrum within the construction industry. And we really do try to kind of accomplish six things. We try to advocate for the industry, address labor and compliance issues, build their networks, build their competency, meet their workforce needs or address their workforce needs, and invest in their future. How do we create a stronger opportunity so that construction is continuously moving forward? Because at the end of the day, AGC of California believes that construction is vital to the success of California. Period. Right? Like we understand that construction is industry one. We're the foundation upon which every other economy is built. And so, what we're trying to do every day is to ensure that our members are building, because when they're building, California is growing and the economy is secure. So, we have a big responsibility in the way that we see it at AGC of California in ensuring that the future of construction is always at the forefront, because it is so vital to the success of California.
Yeah, very nice. I know we talked, before we jumped on the call about, workforce recruiting, but more importantly, retention. What are some of the issues and best practices in around that?
And so that's a huge challenge for us. For over 20 years, kind of recruiting the next generation has been the biggest challenge facing the industry. And the secondary piece to that is we're not able to retain some of the folks that we're able to recruit, and so they go hand in glove. We can't just recruit people and then all of a sudden have them disappear, 2 weeks or 2 months after they get on the job sites, because then all of our efforts to recruit have gone down the drain. So retention has become a bigger conversation for our members and for the industry across the country. So AGC of California is part of the AGC of America network, and I think we're all talking and struggling with the same thing. If you look at the polling that AGC of America does, workforce recruitment and retention continues to be the number one challenge facing contractors across the country. It's true in our locality here in California. It's true in Maine. It's true in Washington and Texas, right? It is a challenge everywhere we go right now is that recruit and retain that worker. Part of the challenge that we have is I'll say what's always been there is the cyclical nature within construction, and that is that we have cycles of high work and cycles of low work. Depending on where you're at, California is lucky enough to be a climate where we have 24/7 building opportunities for the most part, outside of some rain dynamics. But our climate means that we can build in December and January, whereas there are many states where you can't build. The building cycle is not possible because of the snow or the cold or the consistent rain that will happen there. And so that cyclical nature can be hard because that means you're going to work 7, 8 months out of the year and not for 4, and that can be hard if you're not prepared to kind of save and do all those things. So those have always been challenges, things that I think we've learned to overcome. But the next challenge really has been this generational divide. The average age of a craft worker in California right now is between 47 and 48 years old. That's an unsustainable age for us to be able to actually like continue forward. When we look at this construction dive is set out there that by 2031, more than 51% of the industry's experienced professionals will have retired and moved along. we're not backfilling at a rate to replace that and to replace that experience. It's so important that we have experienced individuals. So the challenge then is that if we're not recruiting and we're not necessarily retaining, um, how do we change that conversation? And there's a lot there, like when we think about it. And so the first, on the recruitment side, is really about how we change the narrative. For a long time, construction, especially if you talk to like my contractors, they loved being kind of that best kept secret that, everyone knows construction's out there, but not many people necessarily really understand construction. And that was the way we wanted it. But that meant that everyone else was defining who we are. They were putting our narrative into play. And most of the time, when you think about how the public interacts with construction, it's in ways kind of like the way that we interact with government, right? When you think about government, the ways that it interacts with you every single day, it's things like the DMV, the post office, the IRS. These are not the things that you usually typically say are shining examples of efficiencies or things you're excited to go be a part of. And that's the same challenge that we have in construction. Most interaction that the public has with us is when we're shutting down lanes and causing traffic on the highways or on the roads, or when we're doing the piles and the noise factor from our machines and our heavy equipment, right? Like their interaction with us tends to be when we are causing a nuisance in their day-to-day life, right? So when we're a nuisance factor, they don't value us, right? 100% of the public loves our end product. It's just that we don't have 100% of them appreciating how it gets built, right? And that's the change that has to happen around that narrative. And we have to understand as a public, as a broader public, and that's one of the roles that AGC of California is working on is how do we change that narrative? How do we get people to see and value the work that we do the way that they value our end product, right? And that's the piece that has to shift. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to be the butt crack plumber jokes, right? Or catcalling lazy workers on the side of the road, which is what we tend to be visualized in movies and television. Is that construction is just that? Well, when you failed at everything else, there's always construction, right? At the end of the day, though, what we do is so critically important. We are not a career of last resort. We are a career of choice. We are a highly skilled and trained entity. Our industry requires people who are serious and committed to this work, who put their lives at risk every day in support of a better tomorrow for our communities, our neighbors, our people, right? And that should be valued differently in every crisis, right? Construction is the resiliency factor in every crisis. You look at what is happening in Florida with hurricanes. You look at what happened during a global pandemic and earthquakes in California, or floods in California, or fires in California. You know who's there with those first responders every single time? Construction, construction workers, because they need us to come and clean up the debris or help find victims or push out the debris so firefighters can advance. They need us setting up temporary hospitals during global pandemics, right? We are that resiliency factor. We should be appreciated the way that a first responder responds. And we're not seen as a first responder, but in those moments of crisis, we are out there responding. And so, if the public could just see that and we could own that narrative better, I think people would start to see why careers in construction matter more. Uh, Plus, they provide a great quality of life. They provide opportunities for people to build their families. Um, so that retention, that recruitment effort is such a huge part of it. And we've been working on that through programs like Build California, where we're actually out there talking to the next generation on Instagram and TikTok, helping them understand what is truly the opportunity in careers in construction, both trade and on a management side through engineering and construction management, safety, technology, all of the things that go into our industry today and tomorrow. And we're trying to help them understand that. And so that's been a huge effort on our end to really build up that recruitment effort. But to your point and question really is, but what about the retention side? And that's actually the next challenge. We've finally figured out a way to kind of get them excited about careers in construction, and then they show up on our job sites. And it's not the most welcoming environment. It's not a place where everyone feels like they belong. In 20 years, we've grown anywhere from 2 to 3% our population of females in construction. We went from about 10% to about 12 to 13% right now. That's not a sustainable factor. And again, if we think about that average age of a craft worker, we think about 51% retiring out. We're not going to solve our workforce shortage if half the population doesn't feel welcome and invited and belong, like having a sense of belonging on our job sites, we've got to be able to create a different kind of culture within our industry so that all people feel like they can come and work and succeed and thrive within construction.
Yeah. What are the examples of companies or just general parameters of examples of uh, things that have done right in developing the right culture?
So we've seen a number of contractors now starting to move to, I'll say, better zero tolerance when it comes to, especially job site discrimination. Unfortunately, the EEOC in California put out a report: 72% of construction workers have felt discrimination on the job site. That's not a number to celebrate. That's a number to say we have a problem, right? And so you'll see some contractors who are finally leading in this conversation in a very different way, where they are having a true zero tolerance and they're educating around it. So if they find graffiti in the porta john, if they find graffiti on any of the product, or they hear discriminatory language or witness harassment of any kind, they are shutting down the job site. I'll say in the past, and there are still companies who are doing this, the priority was always schedule and budget, right? On schedule, on time, so on time, on budget, or under budget were our mantras of that's how success was defined. So when I'll say these challenges of people and culture arose, it became more of a ignore that, focus on the budget, focus on the schedule. And in doing so, we've allowed then behaviors, we've turned blind eyes to behaviors that should never be turned away from. We have to confront. And so there are more and more companies that are coming in and saying, no, you know what? We will do better when we have more productive people who feel like they belong on our job sites and are welcome here and want to succeed here. Then this is just a job, get me through it, right? And so they're stopping their job sites, they're shutting them down, and then they're coming in the next day with mandatory training because they're saying this can't be tolerated. And when people see those actions, right? Because we can have zero tolerance policies all day long. I'm not a big fan of zero tolerance unless you can enforce it 100% of the time. Because if you say zero and you kind of let that one slide, it's not zero anymore, right? And this is the problem, is that we've done a lot on checking the box. And that's something that we have to evolve and change. And our industry has shown where they can do that. 34, 35 years ago, we weren't exactly a shining bastion of safety excellence as an industry. Today, every company will tell you we put our people first and their safety is our priority, right? And that's great. And they mean that. And they do it. Our PPE dynamics, our training, our tailgate talks, we make safety a priority because we do believe that our people should be able to return home the same way, if not better, every day after working a good day's of work, right? And that's become real. That's become embedded in our culture as an industry. Um, but we haven't gone farther than just that safety piece. So now we have to go in and talk about how do people feel about belonging on the job site? How do women feel? How do people of color feel? How do people from the LGBTQ plus community feel? Like, are we truly creating the environments where they're not just welcomed, right? We can always say you're welcome here, but when they get there, do they really feel like I belong? And that's that next piece of the conversation, is how we create that kind of culture. And when companies are making that a priority, we can see the changes in productivity. And that's one of the big challenges that construction has faced, is that we have not increased our productivity in 20 years, right? We've barely moved the needle as an industry. And here we are building massive, amazing things, doing innovative things, and yet our productivity dynamics have not changed or evolved. That goes back to what are our priorities? And until we truly, as construction, say people come first, period, we won't change this culture dynamic. And so this is one of the areas that I think AGC of California is leaning in with our members to offer trainings, to just talk about it. Because if we're not aware, that's the first piece. Create awareness. This is a challenge. And then, when we think about it, if we don't make these changes, even for the existing staff who are out there, it leads to other really, really dire situations. And this is where we have been confronting our industry. Our industry's had to confront itself, in truth, around these horrific numbers. Because not just are we having a problem with getting people of different genders and ethnicities and races onto our job sites and retaining them, even those who are there were having a hard time with, because the reality is, and this is the hardest like statistic for me to even talk about from an industry perspective, is construction has the second highest suicide rate out of any industry in the country, double the national average. We have to look at that and ask why. Why are our people making the choice to end their life? One in four, or just about one in four, 23% of all opioid overdoses, deaths in any workplace come from a construction job site. One in four, basically. These are unacceptable numbers. And we have to, again, go, why are our people having to become addicted to painkillers? Why are our people, through that addiction, ending up in depression and in a place where their mental health is not secure? And we are in a place where suicide is at this level. And all of this comes back to what's their environment they're working in? What's the culture that we are providing for these people? Are they free to ask for help? Do they know that we support them and want them to be better? Do we want them to know that if you have pain, don't go like just pop a pill, get yourself like fixed? These are not conversations that are necessarily happening on the job site today, but need to, right? Because until we start having these open dialogue conversations, these numbers will not change, and they are not sustainable. And they will not create that kind of environment where people feel like they belong. So it all comes back to, if we don't focus on culture on the job site, not just the management and office staff, but all the way down with our multi employer job sites, we will not be able to retain this next generation.
Yeah, well said. If people want to get involved with your association um, as a member or more, where they should go, who should they contact?
So, first thing is visit our website. Our website also has free resources on suicide prevention and mental health, how to even begin conversations on stand downs and other things. So, since I just talked about that, we provide that for free. We believe that that is such an important conversation that it's not a member only dynamic. It needs to be out there for everyone. You can go to our website though, and our website has so much information on what it is to be a member, but also what it is to be part of this industry. And so if you go to agc-ca.org, you'll be able to find everything that you need to know about AGC and how to get involved. My contact information is on the website. I've got 54 staff across California that are here to lift up and support and serve the construction industry on all of these facets. And we're here to really make sure that your opportunities as a construction company can be amplified. We want to support you on all of those areas. From a workforce side, we actually are recruiting and placing new workers onto your job sites if you want them, in support with our unions or open shop, depending on how, if you're signed or not. We support all levels of contractors, whether it's a general contractor to a specialty to a sub to a DBE. You are welcome here. And we have resources to support the DBE, resources to support the largest of the large, the billion-dollar companies, the international companies. We're all in this together, and we want to work together as an industry to find common solutions that are going to continue to create opportunities for our members to build and strengthen the state of California, because that has to keep moving for California to continue to grow as a state, and really even this country as a nation, for us to continue to grow. Selfishly, I come into the office every day, proud to work for this company and proud to work for our members and this industry, because I fully believe in what this industry creates and the promise of a better tomorrow that it's building every single day. So when I look at my four kids, who are 13 down to 6 years old, right, and they're in those formative ages where they're going to be looking at careers, but more importantly, they're going to be looking at, where do I start my life when they turn 18? And they look at whether it's a trade school or a college, and either is fine with me. But what I want for them more than anything, selfishly, is for them to be able to choose California. And I don't know that that's going to be a viable option. What I do know, though, is if every day I give it my all to this industry to keep building and strengthening California, they'll have more opportunities to choose California. And that's my goal every day, is to give them that choice. And I think that's the goal of all of our members here at AGC, is that they are building that better tomorrow. And every day counts in bringing that to life.